In the late 1940s, a British journalist asked Mahatma Gandhi, quote, "What do you think of Western civilization?" Gandhi replied, quote, "I think it would be a good idea." And now, the Sasquatch people, the ancient ones, and many races of star people are saying to us, I think it would be a good idea worldwide if we were to grow up emotionally and spiritually and get back into balance, because our Earth Mother is dying. It's polluted, and as a health consultant, I can see cancer rates and other diseases just soaring. This is from being poor stewards of the planet. We are becoming the endangered species. This is critical. This is not about trying to prove anything. This is about sharing and about the message behind the phenomena. I experience the phenomena all the time because my experiences with ETs and the Sasquatch people are ongoing. So they want us to grow up, and they've said to me, your people to us are like children. They don't have the awareness because they're so preoccupied with materialism and with ego. And greed, they said, is the key to all this, the seed of what's happening. People can't seem to get enough. Millionaires want to be multimillionaires, and multimillionaires want to be billionaires, all at the expense of the environment and other people. For me, there are no monsters out there. There are monster hunters trying to shoot them for proof, trying to get real perfect photographic evidence, and in other words, to exploit them. And the only monsters I know are those that are trying to kill them. And this, to me, is disgusting because I have, for 35 years, a very close relationship with the Sasquatch people. They're all also the ancient ones, which people get confused on. I would say mostly the Bigfoot researchers. At a distance, people see this giant, hairy, bipedal person, but they view them as a monster or an animal to be shot. The ancient ones have a human face, very human. Some of the women are beautiful and could probably win Miss America. They're so stunning at times, the ones I've seen. They have round heads like us, and their arms go down in proportion to their bodies as we have. However, the Sasquatch people have peaked heads, hair on their face, more gorilla-like or ape-like, and arms down to their knees. They're a separate race. However, don't be fooled by that. Both races are humanoid. In fact, they're more human than we are, in spite of their looks. They're very spiritual people. They're interdimensional, and they have unbelievable powers and abilities that little at a time I was able to experience, plus many other people, because I've documented 252 people who've had telepathic experiences with them. There's 3 physicians, an attorney, 3 scientists, and 2 professors, and plus people from all walks of life that have experienced this. I've experienced them over 1,000 times in 35 years since they came to me. And when they first came to me, it was in Wisconsin in September of 1979, which was the shock of my life. I wasn't afraid, I was just stunned by what was going on. And I thought, well, I'll never tell anybody. And of course, now my 2 books have gone all over the world, and people call me from all over the world having experiences, because there are 7 different races of these type of peoples. Some are 3.5, 4 feet tall, some are 5 feet tall, some are 6.5 to 7, and some are up to 10, 12, and a few 15 and 16 feet tall. Because they're interdimensional, they can dematerialize. They have access to 8 different dimensions. I've seen them blip out in front of me and disappear, become invisible twice. You see, I don't have any fear. I hold unconditional love in my heart. And I love nature. I'm a wilderness person. I've lived all over the world and been to wilderness areas everywhere. And at times, because of my background, my academic background, they've said to me, when I start to get too heady, they said, little brother, get out of your head and back into your heart. That's where all your knowledge is, not in your head. What's in your head is limited. You can access almost anything through your heart energy. Many people refer to me as the Sasquatch Whisperer, but there are many having ongoing experiences, many whisperers, so to speak, all over, and they call me all the time because I give support. I counsel a lot of people having these experiences, and many of them say, I thought I was going crazy. I couldn't believe this voice in my head, and then standing there was a Sasquatch. About a month ago, a man called me from northern Minnesota, and he broke down and wept on the phone. He was so shocked about the telepathy he experienced and the Sasquatch. He wasn't hunting or anything like that, and now he goes out to this area and interacts with them, and I've counseled him on how to do it and what to do, and so he feels comfortable, and so did the Sasquatch. I knew Dr. J Allen Hynek, and I had several meetings with him, twice in my home, and he told me about an experience that these 4 hunters coming back from northern Minnesota back in the 70s, and they contacted him. They were deer hunting, and they all had rifles, and it was just getting dark as they were coming through a forested area, and they thought they saw this light in the sky that landed behind a hill, and they thought it was a plane crash. So they stopped the car, and 2 of them in the back seat went across the field, but strangely enough, one of them grabbed his rifle and went to the top of the knoll, and there was a spaceship, and 2 humanoid beings stepped out that looked similar to us, but a little different in the face. This foolish person put a shell in his rifle. He had a scope, and he shot one of them, and it fell, and his associate brought him back into the ship, and they ran and took off. The reason I'm saying this is because this is our attitude. Certainly not people here, but I don't know how many times people have shot and wounded a Sasquatch. And then people say to me, well, look, if you're having experiences ongoing for 35 years, then why don't they just come out? Because they don't want to get shot. There's a lot of foolish people out there that live in fear. They live in fear, fearful of everything. And they've told me, they said, Never entertain fear. Stay in your heart space with unconditional love. And during Earth changes, a lot of things are going to be happening that are going to be very upsetting. But stay close to God, however you perceive him to be, he, she, or it, and hold on to love, because whatever you're holding on to, you're projecting outward, and you'll have a more loving, more safe experience. If you're fearful, you will draw in a fearful experience. It's difficult to do at times, but if people worked on it, they'd understand and be able to do that. These sentient beings, the Sasquatch people and ancient ones, and even the star people, want to impart their wisdom and knowledge of how to run this planet, which they can do better than we have. If all you have to do is get a newspaper, and when you're finished reading it, you're depressed because all these wars and craziness is happening. 80% of the fish in the ocean are now gone. And because of what happened in Japan with the nuclear reactor there, all along our coastline, sea lions, dolphins, starfish, all kinds of, in whales and other animals are dying because of radiation. I live in Washington State in the foothills of the Washington Cascades in a cabin. And I'm sort of in a more safer zone, but soon other things are going to happen in the earth, and they told me that there'll be 3 superquakes sometime very soon over the next 15 months. And they said it's sort of a group karma, that Mother Earth is a living organism, and that it's like shaking off the viruses or the fleas that are causing dis-ease on the planet. They don't use money on other planets because they share each other's talents and gifts, and they are simply an exchange to create a balance between people. A ET doctor simply goes and helps people. Each person is good at something, either growing a garden or being a scientist or being an engineer. And it's just a cooperative effort. And their egos are not involved as it is under capitalism. Capitalism is a political cancer now that's spread all over the world, and some of these countries that have like oil now, and they're unbelievably rich, but it's only the upper crust that keeps the monies, and it's not passed down for health care, and like in Africa, Nigeria is a good example, and many of these other areas. We just don't seem to care. People that run these governments are very egocentric and want things for themselves. And that's not the way life is meant to be, because now it's created a lot of problems for people. We need to have a more spiritually healthy society. And spirituality has nothing to do with religion. It's simply respect for all living things, everyone. Doesn't make any difference how they look. I mean, the white Europeans that came here, decimated the First Nations people. They brought slaves with them and treated Afro-American people horribly. Their dogs were treated better than many slaves. And then when the Chinese came over to build railroads, they looked down on them because they looked different, and treated all of these races as subhumans, that they had no worth. This is wrong. We just don't get it. Some of that is carried over. So how will we deal with the Sasquatch problem, in the sense? Will we repeat history and create more dis-ease and murder them? Because they're human, they're 100 times more evolved than we are, and they're more human than us. They haven't started any wars, they don't go around killing members of their families, like you can see almost every day in the newspapers and on the news. So they're very loving. One time I was very upset over a situation, and I hiked up into the forest in Oregon where I was living at the time, and this was 1986, and I needed somebody to talk to, and I talked to the ancient ones and told them I was upset and so forth, and because they can read your mind and feel your emotions, they knew what was happening with me, that I was very depressed at the time, and all of a sudden they sent me this beam of energy that hit me right in the heart space, and I just bursted into tears, and the love that was sent to me was like nothing I've ever felt, all the way to the soul level, to the core of my very being. And then I just felt fine. I just couldn't believe how relieved I felt and how almost high, a very high feeling and relaxed and so on, and given me an emotional healing. You know, I asked them, one of these ancient ones at that time, if they were the caveman that we speak of. I said it that way. I taught anthropology at a New England college for a short time back in the 70s, and so my background is from a Darwinian perspective. And he said, no, I don't know anything about that. And I said, well, where did you evolve? And he said, we were brought here millions of years ago during the times of the dinosaurs by friendly star people, that their planet was being destroyed by volcanic eruptions and so forth, and some ETs would come and kill them and eat them. And good ETs came and took them all off planet and looked for other planets to drop them off at, and they did. This is what he told me. And I said, I asked about us, and he said, oh, we were seeded back then, but your people were seeded much later. And I said, seeded? I knew what he meant, but I never gave it that much thought other than my academic background. And a month later, a friend of mine sent me Zecharia Sitchin's book, The 12th Planet, and that answered a lot. However, there's other races that have dropped off people, not just the Anunnaki. For example, the Dogon people of West Africa, they claim they come from the area in the constellation Sirius. So there's the First Nations people, they all have, and other indigenous peoples in Indonesia and other places say they were brought here. So, the Adam and Eve thing it's cute and it's nice in a sense, but, who did Adam and Eve's children marry? And if incest is against God's laws, then how could they procreate? So, and how did all the races all of a sudden come about? So it's because they, for example, the First Nation people say the same thing, that they were brought here. So we didn't come from Lucy, the bipedal ape that was our first ancestor 3.5 million years ago. That's pure fantasy. I don't care what anthropologists say, they make the leap in the sense of the missing link. In fact, I asked one, I said, are you the missing link? And he chuckled, and I thought, well, what's so funny about that? And he said, you people are the missing link. You don't know where you've come from or where you're going. So that settle it for me, and they're very blunt at times, but in a nice way, but they don't waste words. And when they tell me something, they mean it. They've never lied to me. Some conservatives and mainstream scientists really shy away from the word psychic. And I can sort of understand that. But if they don't like the word psychic, then they should just use a different word that means the same thing, which is quantum physics, which is part of the mainstream. This has all been recorded. Dean Radin, brilliant man, have already proven psychic ability. He's worked for the government and many, many other psychics. He's not a psychic, he's a physicist. Now work for our government, and it started in Russia back in the 60s, and then also in China. So a lot of, like the CIA and so forth, apparently use them. So if they're using them in all these other countries, then it must be a real phenomenon. The first time that in 1979, when an ET and a Sasquatch talked to me simultaneously, I was stunned by that. But it opened me up, and I started to understand what psychicness is. I could hear people thinking, even about me, and that really shocked me. And I started to have all kinds of experiences where I could see ahead and know what's going to happen. I told a friend of mine on a wilderness ranch in Oregon that there was going to be an earthquake soon, here and there in Oregon. And he looked at me and chuckled and said, we don't have earthquakes here. This was back in 1980. And 2 days later, he approached me. I was on his 1,000-acre ranch, and he said, it was just in the news. They just had an earthquake here. So, I don't try to do any of this. This sort of flowed through me, and I try to use it to help others in God's name. I don't belong to any religion. I simply believe in God and pray daily and meditate. They told me to pray often for world peace, for the preservation of Mother Earth, and for the healing of the planet, because if the planet goes, we're all going. So these things that they're telling people, that prayer is more powerful than we realize, and also meditation quiets the mind and keeps us centered. This is extremely important, they said, to be aware, to look at the signs of Earth changes. And certainly, they said, do not live on any coastline. Do not stay around a coastline anywhere in the world. Why they're invisible, 5 times they've touched me over the years. And as I said before, I've watched them dematerialize. They've taken me several times, and so has the star people. Last month, I was taken 4 times. And they told me they were upgrading me. This is not an abduction. This is a part of my training, a part of all of this. And because they direct me, and they're directing me for 2 more books coming up and telling me what they want in it. I sort of have joked about it and said, well, the nuns in parochial school back in the 50s never told me all this was going to happen. So it's something that was a surprise to me, but it feels good to accomplish certain things and to help other people and to share information that may be helpful to others. So they keep saying they're upgrading me, raising my spiritual vibrations, raising my vibrational frequency in order to do more work for them. As a social scientist, I've documented 252 people, as I said, percipients or witnesses that have experienced the psychic realm. and the Sasquatch people, and a small percentage of them experienced the Bigfoot ET connection. There were ETs, which several people experienced, where the Sasquatch is standing there and there's ETs standing beside him while they're talking. So I get telepathic messages both from star people and from the Sasquatch people and from the ancient ones. Where I live, 30 feet into the forest, is a portal that the ancient ones go in and out of, and they interdimensionally come into my cabin and talk to me and share information. And especially if I'm on the phone, they monitor all my phone calls. So NSA isn't the only one, you know. But they do it to help. One woman called me, and I'd never met her at the time, and called me from Los Angeles, and talking of her interest because she had two telepathic experiences, one in the Redwood Forest and another one while camping in Colorado. And she found my book on the internet, and my first book, The Psychic Sasquatch and the UFO Connection. And so she wrote me a 3-page typed letter and then started to call me. And while we're sitting there talking, I said to her, I said, you have pain in your left hip. And I just said it without realizing, and she kind of gave out a small scream like. She said, how did you know that? She said, the doctor said I have arthritis, and the pain's been bothering me now for a month, and 2 weeks ago he gave me a prescription, but it's dangerous stuff, I don't want to take it. And then two ancient ones came into my place and were standing beside me. I couldn't see them, but they were standing beside me and while I was sitting at my desk. And they said, if she gives permission, we will go and heal her. So I told her exactly what they said, and she said, oh, sure, that's fine. And then we started talking again. And about 30 seconds, 40 seconds went by, and all of a sudden, in the middle of a conversation, she stopped and said, oh my God, what's happening? And I said, well, what is happening? She said, my whole body's vibrating. I don't know what's going on. And I said, oh, they're giving you a healing. She said, really? And I said, yeah, they go immediately and doing it for you. And she says, gee, I thought maybe they'd come sometime next week. So, incidentally, she no longer has arthritis. So it's very gratifying for me and for them to be able to help people that want to be helped, and they stay away from 99% of the Bigfoot researchers because of their drive to exploit them. I've seen them in the physical 8 times, and I've seen them a few hundred times where I could see through them as a living apparition. When they move their pupils back and forth, you can see that. One kind of frowned like this, and I could see his skin fold up and on his forehead and on his face. So these are living apparitions, and they can materialize anytime that they want. I've been doing this for 57 years. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Now it dates me. But my whole life has changed, and everywhere I go, whatever I do, they're there. If I travel to Pennsylvania or Florida, California, Arizona, even in the desert, they're there, and the ETs as well. Interdimensionalism is something that a lot of people doubt, but I get case after case of that as well from a lot of these percipients, and they don't know where to go with this information, but they need help, and they want to, it's haunting them. I was at a conference down in San Jose, California in 2007, and after my talk, a man approached me from Colorado, and he said him and his son, his 18-year-old son, went elk hunting, and they decided to separate but still stay fairly close to each other, and just to stand in the edge of the forest and wait. So the young man was leaning against a tree in the forest when he heard something coming, and this deer ran by him. Didn't see him because he was behind the tree, and he heard this thump, 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 thump of something very heavy chasing the deer, and this wind went by him, but there was nothing there. And in a second, the deer was grabbed up, and even though he couldn't see who did it, and it went flying against a tree, its back was broken, and it instantly was killed. He was absolutely stunned and fearful. Then some invisible, huge thing, of course it was a Sasquatch, picked up the hind legs of the deer and held it up, just like you would do a rabbit, and walked towards the young man, holding it out in front of him, and it was just dangling in midair. And he turned and ran. He was going to start shooting in that vicinity, and he decided not to, that whatever it was had tremendous strength. And when he went and told his father said, "That sounds like a Sasquatch," because he had heard somewhere along the line that they are interdimensional. There are actually, that I understand, there's 4 races of them here in the North American continent. As I said before, there's the Sasquatch people that look more ape-like, but don't be fooled, they're very, very human and very intelligent. There are the ancient ones that have human faces. There are what they call the skunk ape of Florida, and I don't like that phrase at all, but they look a lot like orangutans down there. And nevertheless, they are very, very human. And then there's the baboon-faced ones that look like a baboon in the face, but they're 8 and 10 feet tall. I'm not positive because I haven't asked them, and you may say, well, why didn't you? Because they come and go, and they give a message, and sometimes they hang out, and sometimes they don't. But they're very careful of what information they give. But it strikes me that with this, the ETs doing genetic engineering, that possibly, starting with the ancient ones, that they engineered from a orangutan and put their DNA into a human being and created that. And then those that look like a baboon was another cross. But they're all human no matter what they look like. I heard that in Louisiana there's some that look like chimpanzees. So maybe that is happening. It's just my theory, and they've not confirmed this. But there are other races. There are 7 races actually worldwide, and some are small, 3-4 feet tall and so forth, and all the way up to 15, 16, and possibly more than that. Yes, and while researching in eastern Tennessee in 2004, I stayed with a farmer and his wife, and I slept up in the loft, and the 17 Sasquatch were coming in, and they were feeding them, and they had befriended them. There was an area there up in the western part of Appalachian Mountains there that was a kind of a 1 acre field or less in the middle of the forest where they leave food for them. So they said for me to go up there. They wanted to take me up there, and they did. And when I was up there, they were laying down the food. It was quite a bit of food they had for them. And I saw a 6-foot Sasquatch run and leap to go behind a tree and dematerialized in midair. And there were from what clairsentiently I felt, there were 4 of them in that part of the forest. So we walked back to the trailhead, and on the way back, I said to them, let me stop and hoot to them, because I've hooted to them before, and they hoot back. I don't mean like an owl, like hoo 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 hoo. They go hoo hoo hoo, and it's very bellowous. And so I did that twice, and we listened, and the 2 women there busted out laughing, and I said, what's going on? And they looked at me and said, they said to tell Kewaunee, he can do better than that. They have a sense of humor. Why? Because they're a people. They are a people. In 2005, I spoke at a conference in Hawaii, and I made arrangements before I left to go to that was on the Big Island, to go to Kauai. And because there are 12 of them living in Kauai up in the mountains, and there's 6 of them living on Maui. And they said they go to only the spiritual people and the kahunas. But I made arrangements. They said as soon as you get there, they'll know and they will come down. So I'm in the first day there, I'm in a hotel, and it's 6:45 in the morning, and 2 of them came into the room and they said, we'll guide you into the jungle where we want you to camp out. And so I thanked them, and they left. So I'm putting on my shoes, and I said, I'm going to check the weather in general, and so I turned on the TV, 6:45 in the morning, in the hotel room, and there was Harry and the Hendersons on. I said, wow, that's a good omen. So I found the area where they wanted me to go to, and I camped out there, and the second night there, I heard them walking up to my tent. And I said to them, dear friends, why don't you pat the top of the tent and let me know that you're there, really there. And so make sure I'm not hearing things. And nothing happened. And then I'm in my sleeping bag and I close my eyes. I said, oh, okay, I guess I'm wrong. Maybe it's a dog or something went through. And all of a sudden the whole tent shook, bang, 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 and I jumped, and they were laughing about it. I have a ruptured disc that acts up every once in a while, and I was swimming with wild dolphins every day, going out every day that week, a week before that, and in my back I was limping and in a lot of pain, and I could not enjoy myself there. I couldn't walk down the beach very far. I just was puttering because of the pain. So I thought, I'm going to telepath to the star people. So that night when I went to go to bed, I got my sleeping bag and I was on my back and I started telepathing to them, asking them to come to give me a healing. And this is what I said actually. I said, well, after you give me a healing, be sure not to erase my mind. In fact, how about give me a ride? And while I was saying this, telepathing, I just blacked out. The next thing I knew, I woke up inside of the tent again, but out of my sleeping bag and my face against the side of the tent. And now I never toss and turn, and I was confused where I was and everything, and I couldn't find my flashlight or my little alarm clock I had. And I knew that they had taken me. So for one thing, I had no pain, and I had pain even when I went to bed. And 1 hour had passed. So the next day I got up and walked down the beach and decided I'm going to hike up into the mountains along the Nepali coast. And I hiked 3.5 miles, round trip, came down, was sweaty, and then I swam for an hour. No pain. So they've done a lot of wonderful things for me. And in fact, they never even asked me if I had insurance. But these are some of the things that happen to me and other people as well that's profound. And there are, like I said, there are no monsters out there. If you have an open heart and you walk with unconditional love, you have a good chance of connecting with them. Of course, for years, wild animals would walk up to me, jump in my lap while I'm reading under a tree, and so on, and I just don't have any fear. In 1976 in Great Falls, Montana, the Cascade County Sheriff's Department was having one heck of a time because there were spaceships all over the place and Sasquatch being seen everywhere, even in the fields walking along. And I went to the Sheriff's Department there in Great Falls and I asked them to Xerox, if they would, all their material and give it to me, that I was a scientist and a researcher and I wanted to get that information. So the sheriff said, fine. He said, we're going to cross the names out, so come back in about an hour. So that kind of thing. And one of the documents said that a husband and wife was driving along 7 o'clock in the morning on a road, and they noticed two huge Sasquatch walking in the field there. The man got so excited, he jumped out of the car, ran over to the barbed wire fence, and got over the fence and started running up to them. They turned around, one of them turned around and looked at him and started walking towards him. He decided he should be on the other side of the fence again. But before he could do anything, he was on a little knoll and he looked across the field where they were walking towards, and it was a spaceship about 50 feet hovering above the ground. So I have one situation after another that I documented about the Bigfoot UFO connection. And again, in my new book that came out 3 years ago, The Sasquatch People and Their Interdimensional Connection, has a whole chapter on the ET UFO connection there as well, because it's part of the reality. And in 2010, while I was still writing my last book, my editor came up and wanted to have some experiences, so I had her camp outside my cabin. And she didn't have any, but every night after dinner, we'd go for a walk. It was in July, and we would hike the dirt roads from where I live there. And I have a habit of, it's just very natural, I'm a storyteller. And when I was teaching anthropology, I would use examples, like when I was living amongst the Kewaunee Indians in Upper Amazonia, and making reference and then using theories of anthropological theories and then giving examples. So she asked me some questions and I started to explain to her, and then eventually I went into a story to explain, give an example of what I meant. And while I was doing that, we were walking along, two ancient ones came up about 6-7 feet behind us, but they were invisible. They were in another dimension. But my whole body started vibrating. I mean, heavy, heavy energy, very nice energy. And I stopped and I said to her, do you feel that? Because I thought she was feeling that, and then so she could have an experience. And she said, I don't feel anything. And I said, well, you mean you don't feel, this vibration? And I'm going on and on about it, and because I stopped right in the middle of the story, see, to tell her this. And all of a sudden, one of the ancient ones says, never mind us, finish the story. So they follow me, and imagine they can get bored a little bit, and whatever is going on, they like to listen in, and apparently they like my little stories. There's also the alien animal phenomena where people are experiencing black panthers everywhere, even in Hawaii. And one tourist took a photograph of it, a proof. This is in Europe and the United Kingdom and all through North America here. And it's really a worn-out statement that the authorities use and say, oh, someone released a pet. Well, if they released a pet, then it seems like, every person, every so many blocks down has a black panther as a pet, all over the United States and all over other places in Europe. They're seeing them in Italy and as well and so forth. So where are they coming from? That's odd. I mean, how do they ever get to Hawaii. How they even get in? None exotic animal like that is even allowed into Hawaii. I mean, I doubt they swam almost 2,000 miles just because they wanted to see Hawaii. So they see them, and then a few years, 2 or 3 years go by and nothing. Then all of a sudden they see them again. Well, the places they were seeing them are the places that I know of that have portals that lead to a parallel world. So there are African lions seen in Colorado and different places that don't seem to hurt anyone. Even Massachusetts, a man saw him twice, this extra large African lion, and it just looked at him and turned and casually walked away. And where did he come from? He talked to his neighbor, and his neighbor said, "Are you aware there's a portal right there at the edge of your property?" And he said, "No." And so then he started to put 2 and 2 together. And when I spoke at this conference back in the 90s, several people approached me because they saw a Sasquatch on one side of me and an ET on the other, interdimensionally. So they could see them beside me. So one of the men told me about his experience with the African lion. There's elusive kangaroos that people seem to see. Where are they coming from? Then they can't catch them. They disappear. There's werewolf-type beings that are seen. Where are they coming from? There's lizard men or reptilians that were seen in South Carolina and other places. Then people go in there with dogs and surround the area, go in, and there's nothing there. So they're using these portals that lead to another world. And I was told that they use the wolf-like or dog-face beings, who are human, incidentally, and telepathic and so forth as well, that they're called the guardians because they guard the portals so no negative entities can come through. A lot of contactees call me and say, "I just got a message." They were talking to me and they said, "Oh, give Kewaunee a message and tell him that." And so several contactees do this quite frequently. Gnomes, elves, leprechauns, menahunis, and fairies are all interdimensional beings. They're real beings. There's a man I met in Oregon. His wife kept emailing and calling me, wanting me to come out. They lived in the wilderness there in Washington State, and I went to their place and stayed a whole week. And he showed me where they saw these fairies. They were in a field right next to their home, and it was 7 o'clock in the evening in the summertime, and they saw what they thought was these large dragonflies, but they couldn't understand where they were coming from, and they just seemed to be appearing and hovering. And as they were talking about it, they walked towards it, these quote-unquote dragonflies, and one of them came right over and hovered right in their face. It was a fairy. They were all fairies. So this man held a very high clearance in the government and was retired and wasn't really a type of person that would create a hoax. He also told me right in front of their cabin one night, just as it was getting dark, he stepped out and was walking along, and he looked, and all of a sudden he saw this like heat waves in front of him, and then this whole thing opened up in front of him, and he was shocked to see, it looked like right around 1890, somewhere in there, in some city where people, horse and carriages were going by, and these people were promenading down the street arm in arm in front of him, and he's yelling at them, "Hey, hey!" And they didn't know he was there, they didn't respond. And then after a couple of minutes, it slowly closed up again. So his property had this kind of energy there that could create a vortex and plus these portals. There's a black dog or black wolf phenomena too. A woman in Iowa called me and we talked, and the Sasquatch were coming all the time, and they started talking to her and one of her teenage kids. And she saw spaceships out there, And often the Sasquatch would come and talk to her. But she also, sitting in her car one day, she came back from shopping, and she was sitting there. It was just starting to get dark, and she had the window down and was just sort of daydreaming, and was ready to get out of the car and go in the house. And she looked to her left, and this giant black wolf-like canine was standing right there, and the head was right even with the middle of her open window. And she said she turned around and looked at it, and looked at her, leaned into the car and licked her in the side of the face, turned around and walked away. And I said, "Were you afraid?" And she said, "No." There was a sense of peace about the animal, and almost like it was human or something. And later, she found gigantic tracks of a cat that was as big as a plate, a dinner plate, in her garden, several of them. And she called the Fish and Wildlife Department, and they came out and looked at it, and they said it's from a 700 or 800 pound cat. They said, "How could that be?" And you know, they don't tell anybody. I mean, they don't advertise any of this stuff, but this is something that has gone on for a long time with people, and they've reported it to me. Pterodactyls and Thunderbirds, I've interviewed people that have seen them with 30-foot wingspans. So these people were not crazy. One was a postal inspector, and so on. And my ex-wife was at Navajo Indian, and being that I studied also with an Ojibwe medicine woman, that I got a lot of information about how Native Americans view these other alien animals, and how they don't go out and try to shoot them. They accept that as a part of living nature, and not trying to prove anything by destroying it first. That seems to be somewhat of a sociopathic thing that is prevalent in white European societies. There are people like Kelly Nesbitt in Arkansas, Andy Robson in Oregon, and Todd Michael in New Mexico that are having Bigfoot ET experiences ongoing. If you go to my website, sasquatchpeople.com, I'm going to have links to them. There'll be 2 incredible books coming out late spring and early summer, so keep checking my website, and there'll be a lot of information in these books to explain and expound on what I'm discussing with you today. They've saved my life several times. In 2012, I had a brain tumor, and the ETs took me 6 times, and I'm perfectly fine. So they do all kinds of things. Another woman had cervical cancer, and they healed her as well. So I was asked to help someone dying of asthma. When I saw the woman, it freaked me out. She was a young woman, and skin and bones, and just gasping for air. The doctors, nobody could do anything. Acupressure, acupuncture, herbs, shots, and no matter what. And I had 3 Sasquatch and 2 ETs behind me, and I asked the husband to leave the room, and they charged my body, and I reached over and touched her, and she sighed and started breathing normally, and she never had asthma again. I wish I could do that every time, but it stunned me as much as it stunned both of them. But the bottom line is, it saved her life. I have some slides now that I'm going to show you. Yes, this is in Texas. That's my foot next to an ancient one, just to give you an idea of what they look like. This one is from Idaho. The Sasquatch was walking across the stream. The woman saw him, quickly put up her camera, and just as it was dematerializing, this is what she caught. You can see the shape of it as it's going into another dimension. It's a rare, rare photo that's just incredible. There's a little more close-up. To the right, lower right, that's his butt, and they're slightly hunched, and so forth. This is one in Colorado that two men were hiking and heard this noise coming of thumping and stuff. They thought it was elk, and they ended up seeing 3 ancient ones. This is an ancient one, not a Sasquatch. Has a beard and so forth. And he said it was about 7 to 7.5 feet tall. There was one about 5.5 foot that was in front of him, and he put his camera down, and then one about 10 feet was behind this one. So if he'd have kept the shutter down, it would have clicked, and he'd have a whole series of great photos. He worked for a company and did not want anyone to know that he did this. So this was shared with me, and he doesn't want his name attached to it. This is a sketch done by a Russian, Dmitry Bayanov, who, based on the Roger Patterson film that took place October 20th, 1967, and he just made some definition on it, studying the close-up of the frozen frame of the film. So this is a female's face of a Sasquatch. Okay, here's a footprint in limestone in Biloxi, Texas. If you look to the far upper right, there's a man's foot there. This is a 24-inch long foot, and it is right beside dinosaur tracks in 65-million-year-old tracks. And I asked them, I said, was this from some hairless giant or from your people? And they said, no, it's from our people. The hairless giants came much later, in the history of this planet. This is a fresco of an ancient one in Europe. If you go to some of the cathedrals and museums and some of the fine work done in these large buildings, there's numerous ones all over. And they're not Sasquatch, they're human, they've got a human face and so on, and hair all over their body. So they used to be there all over Europe. Now, there are, in Norway and Sweden, there are Sasquatch types. In southern France and northern Spain, in the Pyrenees, there are Sasquatch. And the other place where there are is northern Romania. There are a lot of them there. It was interesting because I saw one of these survival shows on TV where he was in Romania, and they dropped, by helicopter, they dropped him off on top of a mountain, and it showed the vastness of the forest, of the wilderness, I mean, as far as the eye could see. And I thought, wow, and the canyons, and he found caves and everything. So I said, right, perfect place for them. So, I suppose if someone had a guide, an interpreter, that they could get a lot of information based on that. But again, why would they put these things, if, this kind of artwork on buildings and stuff, where do they get the idea? Well, because they've been there all along. This is a spaceship I took. I left for the day Seattle and did a loop into the Cascades and around with a friend. And I asked them the night before, in the morning when I woke up, before we left at 6 o'clock, I telepathed to the ETs and asked them to show themselves. So we're driving along, and a ship went right over us and to the right, but it disappeared so fast that I telepathed to it and said, you went too fast. I didn't see you very well. You need to show me yourself again. And so when we stopped by a lake, this is the shot that I got when I asked them if they would allow me to photograph them. This was taken in northeast Texas on the Oklahoma border. This is one that sort of had a monkey face, and it has a corn cob in its mouth. This was from a tree camera that was set up, and later they asked the people to take them down because it was restricting them. But this is certainly, it's sort of a poor shot, but it's at least of something, and you could see the peaked head on the bottom one of the next frame down. This is the best I was able to do to bring this out, but it was just ready to step over the fence, a barbed wire fence. I went to the fence after, and it's impossible for me to easily step over the fence. So this was 7 feet tall, at least. This is the close-up, again, with a corn cob in its mouth, and he's just going to step over the fence. You can see the face is very simian, but again, it's very, very human, and they know more about us than we know about ourselves. Okay, here's the Guardian. I'm not sure how well you can see it down the bottom center, taken by Andy Robson, another contactee that was visiting me. He's standing beside the portal, and the portals are invisible. So he was standing beside the portal there, and he managed to get this shot. They allowed him. If they didn't want him to do it, he wouldn't have gotten the shot. This is a sketch of an ancient one, and they use eagles, hawks, and ravens as sentinels. And so this is one of them. Again, here's the difference. This is a Sasquatch, and you can see the difference. They look very sober, but like I said, they have a sense of humor. This is Andy Robson here, beside a mannequin at a museum in Newport, Oregon. He asked his mentor and guide how accurate this was, and he said, some of my people look just like that. So this is an accurate rendition of a Sasquatch. Again, they all look different. If you lined up 10 crocodiles, they'd all look alike at a glance, but if you had 10 different Sasquatch or ancient ones, you'd notice immediately that each one was very different. Here's one of an ancient one. Do you see it? He has his arms out straight, and he's turning his head, and it looks like he has a turban on or something, but I still don't know quite what that is. Some of them have that. I hope everyone can see that. They want me this coming summer to take good photographs of them, but they have to go to the Council of Elders to get permission, and they want me to put out 2 more books. One, when they take me through a portal again, and they won't erase my mind. And an ET told me, then you'll understand quantum physics and you'll be able to share this information with the public. So they said, write a short book on it, and then later another book just on photographs. This was taken in Victoria and Bouchart's Gardens on Vancouver Island, Canada. An engineer his hobby was horticulture, took this, and he wanted nothing to do with it. But this is a perfect profile, once again, of a huge Sasquatch. This was in Texas again. I tried to stretch out, and I didn't dare. I couldn't. The stride is 5 and 6 feet long, and certainly none of our people could perpetrate a hoax or anything because you just can't stretch out. Our legs aren't long enough. Now, in conclusion, the message behind the phenomena is to stop warring, stop hurting and killing each other, start respecting all living things in our environment, stop drilling for oil and for minerals that are destroying wilderness areas and our water supply. All of these things are important. And as Wendell Stevens said, our technology has superseded our spiritual development. So we really, don't know what we're doing half the time. But Keep in mind that the Sasquatch and Ancient Ones are terrestrial extraterrestrials, and they interact all the time with the ETs. The ETs have gone to several governments and talked to the head of these governments, and they didn't change anything. They didn't do anything. It's like it's snowballing. You can't stop it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read from my first book, The Psychic Sasquatch and Their UFO Connection, for my conclusion. And this is what, in 1854, what Chief Seattle said when a group of whites said, "We want your land, give us your land." And what he said was very profound. And so think of it in terms of that a Sasquatch, an Ancient One, and even the Star People could easily be saying exactly what he said. So with that in mind, I'm going to conclude by quoting word for word Chief Seattle. Quote, "We know that the white man does not understand our ways. One portion of land is the same to him as the next, for he is a stranger who comes in the night and takes from the land whatever he needs. The earth is not his brother, but his enemy, and when he has conquered it, he moves on. He leaves his father's graves behind, and he does not care. He kidnaps the earth from his children. He does not care. His father's graves and his children's birthright are forgotten. He treats his mother, the earth, and his brother, the sky, as things to be bought, plundered, sold like sheep or bright beads. His appetite will devour the earth and leave behind only a desert. I do not know. Our ways are different from your ways. The sight of your city pains the eyes of the red man, but perhaps it is because the red man is a savage and does not understand." He's being facetious here. "The air is precious to the red man, for all things share the same breath. The beast, the tree, the man, they all share the same breath. The white man does not seem to notice the air he breathes. Like a man dying for many days, he is numb to the stench. But if we sell you our land, you must remember that the air is precious to us, that the air shares its spirit with all the life it supports. The wind that gave our grandfather his first breath also receives the last sigh, and the wind must also give our children the spirit of life. You must teach your children that the ground beneath their feet is the ashes of our grandfathers, so that they will respect the land. Tell your children that the earth is rich with the lives of our kin. Teach your children what we have taught our children, that the earth is our mother. Whatever befalls the earth befalls the sons of the earth. If men spit upon the ground, they spit upon themselves. This we know, the earth does not belong to man. Man belongs to the earth. This we know. All things are connected like the blood which unites one family. All things are connected. Man did not weave the web of life. He is merely a strand in it. Whatever he does to the web, he does to himself. Even the white man, whose God walks and talks with him as friend to friend, cannot be exempt from the common destiny. We may be brothers after all. We shall see. One thing we know, which the white man may one day discover, our God is the same God. You may think that you own him as you wish to own our land, but you cannot. He is the God of man, and his compassion is equal for the red man and the white. The earth is precious to him, and to harm the earth is to heap contempt onto the Creator. The white man too shall pass, perhaps sooner than all other tribes. Continue to contaminate your bed and you will one night, suffocate in your own waste. End quote. Thank you, and God bless you all.